One millionaire offered a home to a homeless single mother, but with one condition. She had no idea he had been in love with her from the very first moment. Secrets came to light, and their lives changed forever. A story of love, redemption, and second chances that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment where you are watching from. The March rain fell violently on Fifth Avenue, turning the sidewalk into a river of dirty water carrying disposable cups, leaves, and the dignity of those who had nowhere to go. Sarah Johnson, 32 years old, was sitting in front of a closed bank, her back against the cold, mirrored glass wall. In her arms, Lily, her 5-year-old daughter, was sound asleep, oblivious to the chaos of the metropolis. The girl was wrapped in a tattered blanket that had once been blue, but was now the undefined color of dust and time. Sarah was too thin. Her bones seemed ready to break through her pale skin, marked by yellow bruises that told stories she preferred to forget. Her brown hair, once carefully maintained, now fell in uneven strands around a face that mixed beauty and exhaustion. Her deep, attentive green eyes observed every movement around her with the wariness of a cornered animal. She wore ripped jeans at the knees and a grey sweatshirt with stains that public restroom soap would never completely remove. The smell coming from Central Bakery across the street was a refined torture. Freshly baked French bread, brewed coffee, that sweet aroma of filled pastries that made Sarah's stomach churn with hunger. She had eaten for the last time the night before, half a portion of rice and beans that a staff member at the soup kitchen saved before closing. Lily had eaten more, of course. Sarah always made sure her daughter ate, even if it meant she herself would go an entire day with nothing in her stomach but water. It was around 3 in the afternoon when the man stopped in front of her. Sarah first noticed the shoes. They were expensive shoes, probably Italian, made of black leather so polished that they reflected the lights of the buildings even in the rain. Her gaze slowly rose. Impeccably tailored trousers, with not a single crease out of place, a leather belt matching the shoes, a white dress shirt under a navy blue suit that seemed to have been tailored directly to his body, and then the face. David Smith was 38 years old, but looked younger. He was tall, about 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that filled the suit jacket with natural authority. His skin was light brown, his black hair cut short on the sides and slightly longer on top, with a few grey strands at the temples that added distinction rather than age. His face had striking features, a strong jaw, a straight nose, thin lips that rarely curved into full smiles, but it was his eyes that drew attention. Dark brown eyes that seemed black, deep and penetrating, with an intensity that made people instinctively look away. He held a large black umbrella, but even so his shoulders were wet, as if he had deliberately walked through the rain before opening it. "Excuse me," he said, his voice deep and velvety, with a neutral New York accent that indicated formal education. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Sarah tightened Lily against her chest, her whole body tensing. She was already familiar with this type of approach. Men in suits who stopped to talk to women on the street rarely wanted anything good. Her heart raced, but she forced her voice to come out firm, almost aggressive. "I'm not interested in anything you're selling, offering, or pretending to give me for free. You can go on your way." A muscle twitched in his jaw. It wasn't anger, Sarah realized with surprise. It was sadness. He slowly crouched down to her eye level, but kept a respectful distance of almost 3 feet. The rain soaked his back now, but he seemed not to care. "My name is David Smith," he said calmly, "and I'm not here to offend or hurt you. I'm here to make a proposal, a real job offer with a contract, salary and benefits." Sarah laughed, a harsh and humorless sound. "Sure, and I'm the Queen of England enjoying a little sun here on Fifth Avenue. Look, whatever your scheme is, I don't have money to give you, I have nothing for you to steal, and I'm definitely not interested in..." She made a vague gesture with the hand that wasn't holding Lily. Any other type of proposal that men like you tend to make? Men. Like me, David repeated, and there was something sharp in the question. Rich. Sarah spat the word as if it were an insult. Men in suits who stop on the street and think they can buy anything, including people. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of rain hitting the pavement and his umbrella. David took a deep breath, as if carefully choosing his next words. You're right to be suspicious, he finally said. If I were in your place, I would be suspicious too. But please, give me 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes to explain. If, after that, you want me to go, I will. You have my word. Sarah studied his face. She looked for signs of lies, manipulation, that oily falseness she had learned to recognize so well during her years with Mark, her ex-partner. But all she saw was sincerity, or maybe he was just an exceptionally good liar. 3 minutes, she conceded, her voice still hard. And you stay back at this distance. 1 step closer and I start screaming. Fair enough, David nodded. He adjusted the umbrella to better shield her from the rain, even if it meant he would be more exposed. I need a housekeeper for my home in West End, someone to handle cleaning, organization, and some meals. The house is large, so the work isn't minimal. I won't lie about that. In exchange, I offer a private room, full meals for you and your daughter, a salary of $1,500 a month with a signed contract, a 13th salary, vacation time, and all regular labor rights. Sarah blinked, processing. $1,500. She hadn't seen that kind of money in, how long? 2 years? More? Why me? The words came out before she could hold them back. The city is full of experienced housekeepers with references, people who aren't. She looked at herself, at the dirt on her clothes, at the daughter in her arms. In this situation. David hesitated, and it was the first time he seemed genuinely uncomfortable. Because I believe you deserve a chance, he said simply, and because I need someone who understands the value of a fresh start. You don't know me, Sarah retorted, her voice suddenly trembling. You have no idea who I am, what I've done, how I ended up here. You're right, I don't know, David agreed. But I know you're here, in the rain, holding your daughter, and yet you're not begging. I saw you before when that man stopped and offered you money. You refused because he wanted to put the bill in your shirt instead of handing it to you. You have dignity, you have pride, and... He swallowed hard. You have a daughter who needs a roof over her head. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Not in front of this stranger. Not in front of anyone. What's the catch? She asked, her voice hoarse. There's always a catch. You want me to... She couldn't finish the sentence. No, David said firmly, looking directly into her eyes. The only condition is that you work. Just that. I won't touch you. I won't make indecent proposals. I won't demand anything beyond the agreed domestic work. You will have a key to your room, total privacy. And if at any moment you feel uncomfortable or threatened, there's enough money for a taxi to wherever you want to go, no questions asked. Lily stirred in Sarah's arms, whimpering softly in her sleep. The little girl had started coughing, a wet cough that had worried Sarah for days. Another night on the street, another night with this cough, and she might need a hospital. Hospital meant social workers. Social workers meant questions about why a child was living on the street. Questions could lead to losing custody. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at the man crouched in front of her, and then at the rain-soaked Fifth Avenue. Somewhere in the city, in a warm apartment, people were having dinner, watching television, living normal lives. She used to be one of those people, a literature teacher, a small but owned apartment, plans for the future. All of that seemed to have happened in another life. If I accept, she said slowly, and you try something, anything, I will go to the police. I don't care if you have money for lawyers, if you know important people. I will fight." "I hope you fight," David replied, and there was something strange in his voice, almost like admiration. "I hope you always fight for what's right." Sarah took a deep breath. 3 seconds of hesitation, 3 seconds during which her entire life hung in the balance, 3 seconds in which she thought of Lily coughing in the rain, thought of the constant hunger gnawing at her stomach, thought of the nights she lay awake fearing someone would try to hurt them while they slept. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I accept. But at the first sign that this is some kind of trap—" "You leave," David finished. "I completely understand." He stood up, extending his hand to help her rise. Sarah looked at his hand for a long moment before accepting it, holding Lily with one arm while supporting herself with the other. His hand was warm, firm, and he let go as soon as she was on her feet. "My car is right there," he pointed to a black Tesla parked a few meters away. "Shall we get out of this rain?" Sarah nodded. Her bare feet, she had lost her shoes 2 weeks ago, making a wet sound on the concrete as she walked. David opened the back door of the car, helping her settle Lily in the seat, before opening the passenger door for her. The interior of the car smelled of new leather and a subtle masculine cologne. It was warm, dry, and absurdly comfortable. Sarah sank into the seat, feeling her muscles relax for the first time in months. David got in on the driver's side, closing the umbrella and placing it on the floor. "Before we go," he said, grabbing a bottle of water from the glove compartment, "you and your daughter must be hungry. There's a diner nearby. We can stop." Sarah wanted to say no, that she didn't need charity, but her stomach growled loudly enough for both to hear. David said nothing, just started the car and drove to a nearby bakery. While he went in to buy food, Sarah stayed in the car, watching Lily still sleeping. What was she doing? Getting into a stranger's car, accepting an offer that seemed too good to be true? But what was the alternative? More nights on the street? More days not knowing if she could feed her daughter? David returned with 2 bags full of food, bread, cold cuts, fruits, juice. He placed everything in the back seat next to Lily. "For the road," he said simply, and started driving. Sarah grabbed an apple, biting into it with a voracity that embarrassed her, but the embarrassment lasted only until the second bite, when the sweet and fresh flavor exploded in her mouth and all she could feel was gratitude. 30 minutes later, the car stopped in front of a mansion in West End. 3 stories of modern architecture, a pristine garden, wrought iron gates. It was the kind of house Sarah only saw in magazines. "Welcome," said David, and for the first time he smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but genuine. "Welcome to your new home." Sarah looked at the mansion, then at her daughter in her arms, and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope, and absolute terror that this hope was just another illusion about to shatter. The mansion was even more impressive inside than out. Sarah stood frozen in the entrance hall, her bare feet sinking into the Persian rug that probably cost more than she earned in a year when she was still a teacher. The ceiling was at least 20 feet high, with a crystal chandelier hanging like a frozen waterfall of light. The walls were white, adorned with paintings she vaguely recognized. Reproductions of Tarsila do Amaral, di Cavalcanti, perhaps even some original works by contemporary artists. "Sorry about the mess," said David, taking off his damp blazer and hanging it on a dark wooden coat rack by the door. He noticed her expression and smiled almost shyly. "It's a joke. I know there's no mess at all. It's just, well, I'm used to saying that when I have guests. Force of habit." Sarah could barely process what she was seeing. Mess. The place was so immaculate it looked like a showroom from a decor magazine. The floor was light marble reflecting the soft lights from the chandelier. A wide, curved staircase led to the second floor, with polished wooden railings that gleamed under the indirect lighting. In the back, she could see what appeared to be a living room with leather sofas and a giant flat-screen TV on the wall. Lily woke up in her arms, blinking in confusion. The girl had the same green eyes as her mother, but her hair was lighter, a coppery brown that shone even under artificial light. Her little face was round, with cheeks that had been fuller before the months on the street. She wore a faded pink dress that was at least 2 sizes too small for her. "Mommy," the girl's voice was hoarse from sleep and a little scared. "Where are we?" "In a safe place, my love," Sarah murmured, kissing her daughter's forehead. "This is David. He offered us a place to stay." Lily looked at David with that natural distrust of a child who learned too early that the world wasn't safe. David, for his part, kept his distance, crouching down again to be at eye level with the girl, but not getting too close. "Hi, Lily," he said softly. "Do you like books?" The question caught both Sarah and the girl by surprise. Lily nodded slowly. "My mommy used to read stories to me," she said, her voice still heavy with sleep, before we left home." Something crossed David's face. Pain, perhaps, or guilt for making the child remember better times. But he kept his tone light. "Well, I have a library full of books here. Tomorrow, if your mommy allows, I can show you. There are even some picture books. What do you think?" Lily looked at Sarah, seeking permission. Sarah nodded, unable to speak with the lump forming in her throat. It had been months since Lily had shown interest in anything other than eating and sleeping. Seeing a spark of childhood curiosity in her daughter's eyes was as painful as it was comforting. "Let me show you both your room," David said, standing up. "I imagine you both want to take a warm bath and rest." He guided them upstairs. The steps were wide and solid, without the slightest creak. On the second floor, a wide corridor extended in both directions, with solid wood doors interspersed with paintings and small decorative tables. David stopped in front of the third door on the right. "This will be your room," he said, opening the door and turning on the light. Sarah stepped inside and felt her legs weaken. The room was huge, larger than the entire flat where she had lived before. There was a king-size bed in the center, with immaculate white sheets and at least 6 pillows. An antique but well-preserved dresser occupied one wall, with an oval mirror above it. 2 comfortable armchairs flanked a small coffee table near the window, which had heavy navy blue velvet curtains. And in the corner, as if it had been placed there especially for Lily, there was a smaller single bed with a comforter patterned with stars and moons. "The bathroom is that one," David pointed to a side door. "It has a bathtub, separate shower, all the towels you need, and—" He hesitated, looking almost embarrassed. "I took the liberty of buying some basic things, clothes, hygiene products. They're in the bathroom cabinet. If they don't fit, or if you prefer other things, we can go shopping tomorrow." Sarah entered the bathroom and almost collapsed. It was larger than many rooms she had seen. Marble flooring, glass shower, a white and gleaming bathtub that looked like it came from a spa. On the double vanity there were shampoo, conditioner, soap, toothpaste, and a toothbrush still in its packaging. And hanging on hangers on the door, 3 sets of women's clothes in various sizes. In addition to children's clothes, clearly bought for Lily. "How did you—" Sarah began, returning to the bedroom. "How did you know our sizes?" David blushed slightly, a reaction so unexpected from a man of his appearance that Sarah blinked in surprise. "I estimated," he said, not looking directly at her. "If they don't fit, we can exchange them. And about that," he turned to face her, his expression serious, "I know that buying clothes before you even accepted the offer must seem strange, presumptuous even, but I didn't want you to arrive here and not have the basics. It's not about control or or assuming things. It's just... He ran his hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. Practicality. Sarah didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to thank him. Another part wanted to question how he was so sure she would accept, but exhaustion was winning over any impulse to confront. "Thank you," she finally said, the word coming out almost as a sigh. "The kitchen is on the ground floor, but I'll show you everything calmly tomorrow," David continued, returning to a professional tone. "For today, rest. There's no rush to start working. Take a few days to settle in, to recover. The fridge is full. Feel free to eat whatever you want, whenever you want." He headed for the door, but paused in the doorway. "Oh, and Sarah." It was the first time he used her name, and the way he pronounced it, with an almost reverent delicacy, made something strange happen in her chest. "The door has a lock on the inside. Use it if you want. You're safe here. You both are safe." And then he left, closing the door gently behind him. Sarah stood in the middle of the room, Lily still in her arms, trying to process the last 30 minutes. Was this real? Or had she fainted from hunger on the sidewalk and was having some kind of elaborate hallucination? "Mommy, can I take a shower?" Lily's voice brought her back to reality. "I'm itchy, lice, probably. Another humiliation among so many. But now they had a bathroom, hot water, shampoo specifically to treat that." "Yes, my love," Sarah said, putting her daughter on the floor. "Let's take a nice shower." The hot water was a revelation. Sarah stood under the shower for an indefinite amount of time, watching months of dirt wash down the drain. She scrubbed her skin until it turned red, washed her hair 3 times, used the liquid soap that smelled of lavender, until she felt she was finally clean. Lily played in, the bathtub full of bubbles, laughing in a way that Sarah hadn't heard in so long that she almost forgot what the sound was like. When they finally emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in soft towels and wearing clean clothes that, miraculously, fit almost perfectly, Sarah felt almost human again. She carefully dried Lily's hair, using a fine comb she found in the cupboard to check for lice. There were a few, but nothing that proper treatment couldn't solve. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Lily murmured, yawning. Sarah looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost 7 in the evening. She should go downstairs and look for the kitchen, but the idea of exploring that huge mansion, of possibly encountering David again, was too intimidating. As if reading her thoughts, there was a soft knock on the door. "Sarah?" David's voice came muffled through the wood. "I prepared a light dinner. It's on the tray out here if you want. Or I can show you the kitchen if you prefer to choose something else." Sarah opened the door just a crack. David was there, secure in his suit but still in a dress. Shirt, this time with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He held a large tray with covered plates. "Nothing too elaborate," he said, looking genuinely concerned. "Just sandwiches, juice, some fruit." "I thought after so long, well, that something heavy might not sit well." He was right. Sarah's stomach would probably rebel if she ate anything too greasy or spicy after weeks of malnutrition. "You can leave it here," Sarah said, opening the door just enough to take the tray. "And thank you for the food and for the shower and for all of this." "No need to thank me," David replied softly. "Good night, Sarah. Good night, Lily." "Good night." The girl's voice rang cheerfully from the back of the room, and Sarah saw David smile before he walked away down the hallway. They ate slowly, savoring each bite. The sandwiches were simple but delicious: whole grain bread, turkey breast, white cheese, lettuce, and tomato. The juice was fresh, orange, sweet, and refreshing. There were also fresh strawberries, bananas, and green grapes that burst in the mouth with that sweet and slightly tart taste. Lily ate until she couldn't anymore, then dragged herself to the small bed and practically collapsed. Sarah carefully covered her, kissing her daughter's forehead and feeling a wave of emotion so strong that she had to sit on the edge of the bed to avoid falling. They were in a real bed, with clean sheets in a heated room, with food in their stomachs. Sarah got up and went to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains. Outside she could see the garden illuminated by strategically placed lights. Well-kept trees, flowers that were probably replaced regularly, a stone path leading to an area with a pergola in the back. It was still raining, but inside it was warm, dry, safe. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass, closing her eyes. Who was David Smith? Why would he do this? No one offered this kind of help without wanting something in return. No one. She had learned this lesson the hard way. Mark had also been kind at first. He had also offered help, protection, a home. And then, slowly, systematically, this home had turned into a prison. Kindness revealed itself as a tool of control. Protection transformed into isolation. The love he swore he felt manifested in screams, in hands that hurt, in words that cut deeper than any physical violence. Sarah opened her eyes, looking at her reflection in the glass. She was different, thinner, with deep, dark circles, but clean, wearing new clothes, in a room that seemed to come straight out of a dream. She approached the door and, after a moment of hesitation, turned the key in the lock. The click was satisfying, final, secure. But as she lay on the huge bed, sinking into the mattress that molded perfectly to her body, Sarah knew that sleep would not come easily, because physical security was not the same as emotional security, and she was afraid, a deep, paralyzing fear, that this night of peace was just the first chapter of a new nightmare. Still, against all odds, exhaustion finally won. Sarah fell into the deepest sleep she had had in months, lulled by the sound of rain gently tapping on the window and the steady breathing of Lily in the bed beside her. And if she dreamed of dark eyes watching her with a disturbing yet promising intensity, she did not remember upon waking. Not completely, at least. Sarah woke up disoriented, her heart racing. For a moment of absolute panic, she did not recognize where she was. The ceiling was too white, too smooth, very different from the open sky or the cracked ceilings of shelters. Then the memory came back in waves. The rain, the man in the suit, the mansion, the room. Sunlight streamed through the heavy curtains, creating golden stripes on the wooden floor. Sarah looked at the digital clock on the bedside table. 9:23 in the morning. She hadn't slept in so late for she couldn't even remember how long. Lily was still sleeping soundly in the bed beside her, her small body curled up in the star-patterned comforter. The girl's breathing was calmer, without the wheezy cough that had frightened Sarah in recent weeks. A night of proper sleep, food in her stomach, a warmed environment. It made a difference. Sarah got up slowly, feeling every muscle in her body protest. Months of sleeping on cold sidewalks left marks that one night in a soft bed could not completely erase. She walked to the window and opened the curtains fully. The garden was even more impressive in the daylight. Emerald green grass trimmed with geometric precision, flower beds organized by color, red roses on one side, white lilies on the other, pink azaleas forming perfect borders. In the back, she could see a pool covered by a glass structure, and beyond that, what appeared to be a small vegetable garden with herbs. It was April, and New York was showing its best spring face. The sky was blue, clear after the storm of the previous night. Birds she couldn't identify hopped between the branches of the fruit trees, cherry trees from what she could see, with their dark fruits hanging directly from the trunks. A movement caught her attention. David was in the garden wearing jeans and a simple grey t-shirt, so different from the suited executive of the day before that she almost didn't recognize him. He was pruning rose bushes with large shears, his movements precise and careful. There was something meditative about the way he worked, completely focused on the task, oblivious to the world around him. Sarah watched him for a long moment. Without the tailored suit, he looked younger, more approachable. The muscles in his arms were defined. Under the t-shirt, as he stretched to reach higher branches, his hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had run his hand through it several times while working. There was something hypnotizing about seeing him there, a clearly wealthy man, performing a task he could easily delegate to a gardener. As if feeling watched, David looked up. His eyes met hers through the second-floor window. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he raised his hand in a hesitant wave, a half-smile curving his lips. Sarah instinctively stepped back, letting the curtain fall. Her heart was racing too fast, a reaction she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't exactly fear. It was something more complicated, more confusing. "Mommy," Lily's sleepy voice came from the bed. "Is it morning?" "Yes, my love," Sarah forced a smile, turning to her daughter. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Lily sat up, rubbing her eyes. Then she looked around the room, as if confirming that it hadn't been a dream. "Are we still in the big house?" she asked, her voice heavy with cautious hope. "We still are," Sarah confirmed, sitting on the edge of Lily's bed. "And today we're going to explore the house more. But first, how about we have breakfast?" "Is there going to be food?" Lily asked, and the simplicity of the question broke Sarah's heart into 1,000 pieces. "Yes, there will be food," she promised, kissing the girl's forehead. "Shall we get dressed and go down?" 20 minutes later, they were both descending the staircase. Sarah had chosen the simplest outfit from the wardrobe, dark jeans and a navy long-sleeved top. Lily wore a light pink dress with small white flowers printed on it, completely different from the worn and dirty clothes they used to wear. The ground floor of the mansion was a labyrinth of interconnected rooms. The entrance hall led to a spacious living room, which in turn opened to a formal dining room with a table that could easily seat 12 people. All the surfaces gleamed, the marble floor, the dark wood furniture, the mirrors on the walls. Sarah followed the smell of freshly brewed coffee and found the kitchen. It was the kind of kitchen she had only seen on TV, a central island with a cooktop, white cabinets reaching to the ceiling, appliances. In the stainless steel kitchen, there was a refrigerator the size of an entire wardrobe. Natural light streamed through a large window overlooking the side garden. David was seated at the breakfast table, a glass and iron structure near the window. He had a laptop open in front of him, reading glasses perched on his nose, but he closed the screen as soon as he saw them enter. "Good morning," he said, removing his glasses. "I hope you slept well." "We did," Sarah replied, keeping her distance. Lily was partially hiding behind her legs, watching David with a mix of curiosity and shyness. "Great," David stood up, gesturing toward the nearby counter. "I didn't know what you liked for breakfast, so I prepared some options. There's baguette, whole grain bread, cold cuts, cheeses, fruits, juice, milk, coffee and hot chocolate. Feel free to take whatever you want." The counter was indeed filled with options. Plates arranged with different types of cold cuts, a basket of still warm baguettes. He must have gone to the bakery early, bowls of chopped fruits, and thermoses with hot liquids. "Is all this for us?" Lily whispered, her eyes wide. "It's all for you," David confirmed, crouching down to be at the girl's height, but maintaining a respectful distance. "And if there's something you like that isn't here, just let me know, and I'll get it, okay?" Lily looked at Sarah, seeking approval. Sarah nodded, still processing the generosity. The girl practically dashed to the counter, her eyes sparkling at the sight of so many options. "Take it easy, Lily," Sarah warned. "Remember what we talked about. Eating too quickly after so long can be bad for you." "I know, Mommy," Lily replied, but her hand was already reaching for a piece of cantaloupe. Sarah prepared a plate for her daughter, a baguette with butter, some Slices of cheese, strawberries, and a glass of orange juice. Lily ate slowly, savouring each bite as if it were the most delicious thing in the world. And perhaps it was, compared to the sparse and irregular meals of the past few months. "And you?" David asked gently. "Aren't you going to eat?" Sarah hesitated, then prepared a simple plate for herself. She sat at the table with Lily, aware that David had returned to his chair but hadn't resumed working on the laptop. He was just sipping coffee, watching them with an expression that Sarah couldn't quite decipher. The silence that settled was not comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was charged with unasked questions, unresolved tensions. "So," David finally spoke, his voice careful, "how would you like to spend the day? There are no obligations yet. I thought maybe you'd want to explore the house, rest more, or if you need anything specific, we can go out to buy it." "You said you had a library," Lily suddenly said, her voice surprisingly firm for such a small child. "With picture books?" David smiled, and it was a genuine smile that lit up his entire face. "I did. Would you like to see it?" Lily looked at Sarah, who nodded slowly. The girl jumped from her chair, eager. The library was on the first floor, in a room that took up almost half of the east wing of the mansion. The walls were lined with dark wooden shelves from floor to ceiling, filled with books organized by categories that Sarah immediately recognized: Brazilian fiction, foreign fiction, non-fiction, reference, and surprisingly, an entire section dedicated to children's books. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the spines of the books. Machado de Assis, Clarice Lispector, Guimarães Rosa, Lima Barreto, well-preserved old editions, some clearly valuable first editions. "You like literature," David observed, not as a question but as a statement. "I used to be a teacher," Sarah replied before she could think, then immediately regretted it. She didn't want to share details of her life, not yet, but David didn't press. He just nodded, as if this information confirmed something he already suspected. "The children's section is over there," he pointed to Lily, who was already running in the indicated direction. Sarah followed her, finding her daughter with sparkling eyes in front of a collection that included classics like Dr. Seuss, Eric Carle, Mo Willems, as well as more recent illustrated books. "Can I read?" Lily asked, already holding 3 books against her chest. "You can read as many as you want," David said. "This library is meant to be used, not just for decoration." Lily settled into an armchair that was too big for her, opening the first book with reverence. Sarah stood by, watching her daughter, feeling such an intense emotion that she had to bite her lip to keep from crying. "She loves stories," David commented softly, coming to stand beside Sarah. "I used to read to her every night," Sarah admitted, her voice hoarse, "when we still had our own home, before—" She paused, not wanting to continue. "Before what?" David asked gently. Sarah looked at him, searching for signs of morbid curiosity or judgment. But all she saw was genuine interest, perhaps concern. "Before everything fell apart," she finally said vaguely. David nodded, accepting the non-answer. "If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here," he offered. "But you don't have to. Your past is yours, to share or keep as you prefer." The statement was so unexpected, so respectful, that Sarah felt her defenses waver dangerously. "Why are you doing this?" The words came out before she could hold them back. "Really, no one does something like this, offers all this, without wanting something in return. So tell me now, David, what do you want?" David was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Sarah's with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she forced herself to maintain eye contact. She needed answers. I needed to understand who that man was and what he really wanted. "Do you want the truth?" he finally asked, his voice low so as not to scare Lily, who remained engrossed in her books. The complete and honest truth. Yes, Sarah replied, crossing her arms over her chest in a defensive gesture. I want it. David took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair in a gesture she was starting to recognize as a sign of nervousness. Then let's go to my office. There's something I need to show you. He glanced at Lily. Will she be okay here alone for a few minutes? Sarah hesitated, but Lily was so absorbed in an illustrated fairy tale book that she didn't even notice the adults' conversation. Yes, she agreed, although every maternal instinct screamed at her not to let her daughter out of sight, even for a second. David's office was on the same floor, across the hall. It was a masculine environment, with dark wood-paneled walls, a huge mahogany desk, leather chairs, and more bookshelves. This time, mostly about business, economics, and architecture. There were framed diplomas on the wall. Business Administration from NYU, an MBA from Harvard, various certifications. David closed the door behind them and walked over to a metal filing cabinet near the window. After visibly hesitating, he unlocked one of the drawers and pulled out a brown leather folder. Before I show you this, he said, turning to face her, I want you to know that I never intended to hide it. I was going to tell you anyway, but I thought it would be easier once you were more comfortable here. But you're right to ask. You deserve to know. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Whatever was in that folder, David was genuinely nervous to show her. She saw his hands tremble slightly as he opened the folder on the desk. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, and they were all of Sarah and Lily. Sarah's blood ran cold. She picked up the photos with trembling hands, going through them one by one. Sarah teaching in a classroom when she still worked on the social project. Sarah in line at a grocery store. Sarah and Lily walking through a park. More recent photos from the last few months. Sarah sitting on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, Lily sleeping in her lap. Sarah rummaging through a dumpster behind a restaurant. Sarah trying to shield herself from the rain under the awning of a closed shop. Each photo was dated with notes on the back. January, still living in the boarding house on Augusta Street. February, first time I saw her on the street. March, she's thinner, concerning. Sarah dropped the photos as if they were burning her hands, retreating until her back hit the door. You followed me. Her voice came out as a strangled whisper. You photographed me. You stalked me for months. Yes, David admitted, and at least he had the decency to look ashamed. I know how this looks. I know it seems like obsession, madness, something completely inappropriate. And maybe it is all of that. But please, let me explain. Explain? Sarah laughed, a humorless sound bordering on hysteria. How do you explain this? How do you justify stalking a woman and her daughter like a stalker? I can't justify it, David said, taking a step toward her but stopping when she flinched. But I can explain why. Sarah, do you remember teaching at the social project near the commercial building in the Upper West Side about 6 months ago? Sarah blinked, confused by the change of subject. Yes, I taught literature twice a week to at-risk teenagers, but what does that have to do with... I have an office in that building, David interrupted, on the 8th floor, and every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 in the evening, when you arrived to teach, I would stop what I was doing and go to the window just to see you walk in. It sounds crazy, I know, but there was something about you, the way you smiled at the security guards, how you greeted the students who were already there. You radiated a passion, a light that I had never seen in anyone. He walked over to the window, looking out at the garden, his back turned to Sarah. One day, he continued, his voice lower, I went downstairs. I made up some excuse about checking something with the building management, but really I wanted to see you up close. I wanted to understand what it was that attracted me so much. I got close to the room where you were teaching. The door was ajar. David turned to face her again. "You were talking about Machado de Assis, about Dom Casmurro, and it wasn't a typical technical rehearsed lesson. You spoke as if you were revealing the secrets of the universe to those teenagers. Your eyes sparkled. You quoted passages from memory, made connections to their lives, turned classic literature into something alive, relevant, urgent. I stood there, hiding in the hallway like a 38-year-old idiot, completely fascinated." Sarah wanted to remain cool, distant, but something in the raw sincerity of his voice made her listen. "For 2 weeks, I went down every Tuesday and Thursday. I always stayed in the hallway, listening to pieces of your lessons. I told myself it was ridiculous, that I was acting like an obsessed teenager, but I couldn't stop." David ran his hand over his face, the gesture weary. "Then, suddenly you stopped showing up. I discreetly asked the project coordinator. She said you had to leave due to personal issues. I was disappointed, more than I should have been, but I moved on, or tried to." He returned to the desk, leaning against it. 2 months later, I was coming back from a business dinner. My driver took Fifth Avenue, and then I saw you, sitting on the sidewalk, Lily sleeping in your lap. It took me a few seconds to be sure it was you. You looked so different, so thin in dirty clothes, but it was you, the same woman who spoke of Mark Twain as if he were a close friend. "And you took pictures," Sarah said, her voice harsh, "like a voyeur." "Yes," David didn't try to defend himself. "I told the driver to go around the block. I needed to think." "You were clearly the same passionate teacher I had seen months before. How did someone like you end up on the street?" "What had happened? I wanted to help. But how? Pulling up in the car and offering money would be offensive. You would probably think I wanted something in return. So I started to observe." "For months," Sarah added, the knot in her throat tightening. "For months," David agreed, clear shame in his voice. "I passed by Fifth Avenue every day. Sometimes you were there, sometimes you weren't. I took pictures because I was trying to understand. Where did you sleep when you weren't on Fifth Avenue? How did you get food for Lily? Did you have shelter, family, someone who could help?" "You could have just asked," Sarah said, but the anger was starting to give way to genuine confusion. "I could have," David admitted, "but in the first days you barely looked at anyone passing by. You were always alert, always tense. I knew a direct approach would scare you. So I watched, and the more I watched, the more—" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "More what?" Sarah pressed. "The more I fell in love with you." The words came out in a tense whisper, heavy with emotion. "For your strength, for the way you protected Lily, how you still read to her using books you borrowed from the library, how you refused handouts from men who clearly wanted something in return, how you maintained your dignity even when everything was falling apart around you." Sarah was left speechless. She looked at the photos spread out on the table, then at David, trying to process what she had just heard. "You don't know me," she finally said. "Those photos, those observations, they're not me. They're fragments, frozen moments. You have no idea who I really am." "You're right," David readily agreed. "I don't know your whole story. I don't know what brought you here. I don't know your fears, your dreams, your scars. But I want to know, not the romanticized idea I've built, but you, the real, complicated, imperfect person, if you let me." "That's not love," Sarah said, though her voice sounded less certain than she intended. "It's obsession. It's sick." "Maybe it is," David admitted, and the raw honesty of his answer surprised her. "It's probably true, but when I saw you that night in the rain, with Lily coughing, I couldn't just walk past. Not again. I had spent months just watching, telling myself I was waiting for the right moment. What if there was no right moment? What if I kept waiting until it was too late? Sarah felt tears burning her eyes and fought fiercely to hold them back. The job offer, she said slowly, wasn't real, was it? It is real, David replied firmly. It is real. I need a housekeeper, that part is true. The house is too big for me to manage alone, and the last person who worked here retired 3 months ago. But he hesitated. Yes, the offer was made specifically with you in mind. I wouldn't have offered it to anyone on the street. It was made for you. Because you're in love with the idea of saving me, Sarah accused, her voice trembling. No, David said, taking a step toward her. Sarah didn't back away this time. Because I saw an extraordinary woman in terrible circumstances and wanted to offer a chance, a real chance to start over, not a handout, not charity, a job, a salary, dignity, and yes, selfishly, a chance for me too, a chance to know you, to maybe, eventually, if you want, be part of your life in some way. You don't have the right, Sarah whispered, but the words came out weak. You don't have the right to observe me like this, to take pictures, to build fantasies. I don't, David readily agreed. You're absolutely right. It was an invasion of privacy. It was wrong. And I would completely understand if you wanted to walk away right now. I can give you enough money for you and Lily to stay in a hotel for a few weeks while you look for another job. Or I can help you find another job, another place to live, with no expectation of future contact, whatever you want. Sarah looked at the photos again. There were dozens of them, months of careful, meticulous observation. It was disturbing. It was invasive. It was completely inappropriate, but it was also real. The emotion in David's voice was undeniable, the tremor in his hands as he showed the photos, the genuine shame on his face as he admitted what he had done. I need to think, Sarah finally said. I need to process all of this. Of course, David nodded immediately. Take as long as you need. Days, weeks, however long it takes. And Sarah? He waited until she looked at him. The photos. I will destroy them, all of them, right now in front of you if you want. I should never have taken them. Sarah watched as David gathered all the photographs, taking them to a small paper shredder in the corner of the office. One by one he fed them into the machine, the mechanical sound filling the tense silence. When he finished, he turned the filing drawer upside down, showing it was empty. Done, he said. It's over. Sarah nodded slowly, then turned and left the office without saying anything more. She returned to the library, where Sarah was still immersed in her books, completely oblivious to the emotional storm that had just unfolded in the hallway. Mommy! Lily looked up, smiling. Look at this book. It has dragons. Sarah forced herself to smile, sitting down next to her daughter. How lovely, my dear. Do you want me to read it to you? I do. And so Sarah spent the next hour reading about dragons and brave princesses, her voice automatic, while her mind spun in endless circles. David Smith had been photographing her and Lily for months. He had watched, documented, essentially stalked them. It was wrong. It was disturbing. It was possibly even criminal, but he had also been the one who stopped in the rain, who offered not just temporary shelter but a real job, who bought clothes and food and prepared a room with a bed for Lily, who admitted his mistakes without trying to justify or minimize them. Sarah didn't know what to think. She didn't know if she should be terrified or touched, furious or grateful. Perhaps it was all of those things at once. And that ambiguity, that inability to categorize David clearly as a villain or a savior, was possibly the most frightening thing of all. The following days unfolded in tense and careful silence. Sarah established a distant routine. She woke up early, made breakfast for herself and Lily in the flat, using a small tray she took from the kitchen the night before, and only went downstairs when she was sure David had already left for work. She explored the mansion methodically, memorizing each room, each exit, each window that could serve as an escape route if necessary. The house was even larger than it seemed at first glance. Besides the ground floor with the living room, dining room, kitchen and office, there was a home theater in the basement, fully equipped with reclining chairs, and a projection screen. The second floor had 6 bedrooms, each with an ensuite bathroom. The third floor was a single master suite that clearly belonged to David. Sarah only took a quick glance, feeling like an intruder, and immediately left. She began to work, even without David asking. She cleaned, organized, folded towels, ironed clothes. She needed to feel useful, needed to justify her presence there in some way that didn't involve David's disturbing confession. The physical activity also helped calm her restless mind. Lily visibly flourished. In less than a week, her cheeks were fuller, her eyes brighter. The cough had completely disappeared. She spent hours in the library, surrounded by books, or in the garden, chasing butterflies and watching the jabuticabas ripen on the branches. The girl rarely asked about David, but Sarah noticed how Lily looked at the door whenever she heard his car arriving at night. David, in turn, seemed to be deliberately giving space. He left early for the office and returned late. When they were in the same house, he kept a respectful distance, always announcing his presence before entering a room. He left polite notes on the fridge. "I made lasagna yesterday. It's in the glass container if you want to heat it up. I bought strawberry ice cream. I saw that Lily likes it. I need to travel tomorrow to Springfield. I'll be back only at night." One afternoon in April, Sarah was folding clothes in the laundry room when she heard voices coming from the living room. One of them was David's. The other was female, sharp, laden with barely concealed irritation. "Have you gone crazy?" The woman's voice echoed through the house. "Completely crazy." Sarah quietly approached the hallway, staying out of sight but within earshot. "Victoria, please lower your voice," David said, tired. "I don't want to scare them." "Scare them?" The woman, Victoria, laughed humorlessly. "David, you brought a complete stranger to live in your house, a woman you found on the street. You know nothing about her past, if she's dangerous, if she's involved with drugs or—" "Enough," David's voice cut through, cold as ice. Sarah had never heard that tone from him before. "Don't speak about her like that." "I'm your sister," Victoria retorted. "I'm a lawyer. It's my job to think about these things, to protect you from people who might want to take advantage." "Sarah isn't taking advantage of anything," David interrupted. "She works, cleans the house better than any professional service I've hired, takes care of everything without me asking, and she hardly speaks to me, Victoria. She actively avoids me. Does that sound like someone trying to take advantage?" There was a pause. Sarah could imagine Victoria processing the information, recalibrating her attack strategy. "Then explain it to me," Victoria said, her voice slightly softer but still suspicious. "Why did you do this? Why this specific woman? What's so special about her?" The silence that followed was too long. Sarah held her breath, waiting. "Because she makes me feel something I've never felt before," David finally replied, so low that Sarah had to strain to hear. "All the women who have dated me over the years, they like the David who has money, who is successful, who can take them to fancy restaurants and international trips. None of them cared about the David who grew up sharing a room with 3 brothers in South Side. The David who went to school with holes in his shoes. The David whose mother said he would never be anything in life." "Dave," Victoria's voice softened considerably. "Sarah looks at me as if I'm just a man," David continued, "not with admiration for my bank account or impressed by the mansion. She looks at me with suspicion. Yes, with caution, even with fear at times, but also with honesty. She doesn't perform to please me. She doesn't pretend to like things she thinks I will approve of. She is brutally, refreshingly real. And that is more attractive than any seduction game that has ever been played on me." "You're in love with—" "She," Victoria said, not as an accusation, but as a concerned observation. "I am," David admitted. "Or at least, I am in love with the possibility of what we could be. I know it sounds ridiculous. I know we barely know each other. But Val, when was the last time you saw me truly happy, really excited to come home at the end of the day?" Sarah leaned her head against the cold wall, closing her eyes. The sincerity in David's voice was palpable, and it terrified her, because part of her, a small but growing part, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there were men who didn't turn love into control. That protection didn't have to come at the cost of freedom, but Mark had also been kind at first. He had also said beautiful words, and then, slowly, systematically, he turned those words into invisible cages. "All right," Victoria sighed, "but I will investigate her. Not to hurt her, David, but to protect you. If she has any criminal history, involvement with dangerous people, anything that could harm you, you need to know." "No," David said firmly. "Let her tell me in her own time. If there's something she wants to share, it will be her choice, not because she was exposed by an investigation." "You're being naive," Victoria countered. "I'm being respectful," David corrected. "Every person has the right to their own story, Val. Sarah will tell me hers when she's ready. If she's ready." Sarah heard footsteps approaching and quickly returned to the laundry room, pretending to be busy folding towels as Victoria passed through the hallway. The woman stopped at the threshold, observing Sarah with critical eyes. Victoria Smith was around 40 years old, with short black hair in a sleek, modern cut. She wore a pristine grey suit, high heels, and understated but perfect makeup. She was intimidatingly beautiful, with sharp features reminiscent of David's, but in a feminine version. Her eyes were intelligent, calculating, accustomed to quickly assessing people and situations. "You must be Sarah," she said, her voice polite but cold. "Yes," Sarah replied, keeping her hands busy with the towels. "And you are David's sister." "Victoria," she confirmed, entering the laundry room without asking for permission. "Corporate lawyer, divorced, professional skeptic." Sarah almost smiled at the straightforward introduction. "Nice to meet you," she said, though she wasn't sure if it was true. "I'll be honest. With you," Victoria crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't trust you, not yet. My brother is a good man, maybe too good for his own good. He sees the best in people, and that has hurt him before." "I understand," Sarah said calmly, meeting Victoria's gaze without flinching. "And you're here to warn me not to hurt him." "I'm here to assess you," Victoria corrected, "to decide if you're a clever opportunist or genuinely someone in a tough situation that my brother has decided to help." "And what's your verdict?" Sarah asked, surprising herself with the direct confrontation. Victoria studied Sarah for a long moment. Her eyes scanned the simple but clean clothes, the hands that continued methodically folding towels, the unmade face but clean, the straight shoulders despite the obvious tension. "I haven't decided yet," she finally admitted. "But I'll tell you one thing. If you're here to pull a fast one, if you're planning to sue my brother over something fabricated, if you have any intention of harming him in any way, I will destroy you. I have resources, contacts, and absolutely no scruples when it comes to protecting my family." Sarah should have been intimidated. She should have felt fear from this clearly powerful and well-connected woman making open threats. But instead, she felt something akin to respect. "I don't want anything from your brother," Sarah said, placing the last folded towel in the basket. "Accept a fair wage for honest work, and as soon as I save enough money, I'll look for a place of my own for me and my daughter. David offered help when I was desperately in need, and I'm grateful for that. But I have no intention of becoming a permanent dependent on anyone. Never again." The last sentence came out with more emotion than Sarah intended. Victoria noticed, her eyes narrowing slightly. Never again, she repeated. So you've been dependent on someone before, someone who used that against you. Sarah didn't respond, but her silence was answer enough. Look, Victoria sighed, her posture relaxing slightly. I'm not necessarily your enemy, but I'm also not your friend. I'm David's sister, and my job is to protect him. If you really are who you seem to be, someone who has had bad luck and needs a chance, then we have no problem. But if you... I understand, Sarah interrupted. You've made it very clear. Victoria nodded, then turned to leave, but she stopped at the door. One thing, though, she said, not looking back. My brother is genuinely a good man, foolish in matters of the heart, too romantic for his own good, but good. If you decide to give him a chance, know that you're dealing with someone who will love you with everything he has. And if you can't match that level of commitment, be honest about it. Don't leave him waiting for something that will never happen. And with that, Victoria left, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor until they completely faded away. Sarah was left alone in the laundry room, her hands trembling slightly. The conversation had been more intense than she expected, but also enlightening. Victoria loved her brother. That was obvious, and she was willing to be the villain if it meant protecting him. Sarah could respect that. She would do the same for Lily. Later, when David came home, earlier than in recent days, Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner. He had decided that cooking was part of his responsibilities, and besides that, the activity was comforting, familiar. "Hi," David said from the door, hesitantly. "Do you need help?" "No, thank you," Sarah replied, focusing on the chicken she was seasoning. "I met your sister today." "I know. Sorry for her showing up like that, unannounced." David entered the kitchen, keeping his distance but close enough to talk. "Victoria is intense." "She loves you," Sarah said simply. "That's good. Everyone should have someone like that." "Do you?" David asked softly. "Someone like that?" Sarah thought about her own family, so distant now. Her parents, who disapproved of Mark from the start but whom she ignored. Her best friend from college, who tried to warn her but Sarah pushed away. All the bridges she had burned herself, isolating completely before realizing what she was doing. "No," she admitted, "I don't have." "Then let's make a deal," David said. Sarah looked at him sideways. He was leaning against the counter, hands in his pockets, relaxed posture but intense eyes. "You tell me one thing about yourself, something real, and I'll tell one about me. No judgments, no pressure, just really getting to know each other." Sarah hesitated, the knife hovering in the air over the chicken. "Why?" she asked. "Why is this so important to you?" "Because I already told you how I feel," David replied honestly. "But you don't know who I really am, beyond the rich guy with the big house, and I don't know who you really are, beyond the passionate literature teacher who ended up on the streets. I want to know you, Sarah, not the idea of you yourself." Sarah placed the knife on the board, turning to face him completely. "All right," she said slowly. "One thing, but you start." David nodded. "I'm afraid of heights," he said, and Sarah blinked in surprise. "Completely terrified. I work on the 8th floor of a building, and I need to take a breather before going up every morning. No one knows this, not even Victoria, but when I look out the window and see the ground so far away, my heart races and I need to step back or I start hyperventilating." The vulnerability of the confession was unexpected. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of insincerity, but she saw only embarrassed honesty. "Your turn," David said. Sarah took a deep breath. "I used to self-harm," the words came out before she could censor them, "when I was with Mark, my ex, in the last months with him, when everything was too bad but I was too trapped to leave. I self-harmed because it was the only pain I could control." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah braced herself for judgment, disgust, or worse, pity. But when she looked at David, she saw only understanding and a deep sadness. "How long ago?" he asked softly. 8 months, Sarah replied, "since I finally left. I haven't cut myself since then." David nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I know it wasn't easy." And there, in the kitchen, smelling of garlic and rosemary under the soft afternoon light coming through the window, something changed between them. It wasn't total trust, not yet, but it was the first fragile step toward something real, something that scared Sarah more than anything. May arrived, bringing cooler mornings and a constantly cloudy sky over New York. Sarah woke up early, watching through the window as the garden was covered by a fine mist that took a while to dissipate. There was something melancholic about that month, something that perfectly matched the whirlwind of emotions she had been feeling. Conversations with David had become more frequent. Not long, not too deep, but constant. He asked about the books she was reading. She commented on news she saw on TV. They shared morning coffee now, a routine that had naturally established itself after that first confession in the kitchen. Lily loved those mornings, chattering happily about the books she was discovering, about the birds she saw in the garden, completely oblivious to the subtle tension that still existed between the adults. One Thursday morning, David was reading the newspaper while having coffee when he asked a seemingly casual question. "Sarah, are you interested in going back to teaching? I mean, eventually?" Sarah paused with the cup halfway to her mouth. "Why do you ask?" "Because I know the principal of a public school in Brooklyn." David folded the newspaper, looking directly at her. "She mentioned they need a substitute literature teacher. It would be temporary, just until the end of the semester, but it could be an opportunity." Sarah's heart raced, going back to teaching, going back to doing what she loved, what defined her before everything fell apart. But it also meant exposure, meant stepping out of the safe bubble of the mansion, meant facing the world again. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice low. "You don't have to decide now," David said gently. "But if you want, I can set up an informal chat. No pressure, just for you to get to know the school, see how you feel." Sarah looked at Lily, who was drawing in a notebook that David had bought for her. The girl was so different from the scared and hungry child from a month ago. Healthier, happier, more like who she should be at 5 years old. "I'll think about it," Sarah finally said. "That's all I ask," David smiled, returning to the newspaper, but before they could continue, the doorbell rang. David frowned, checking the clock. "I'm not expecting anyone," he murmured, getting up. Sarah heard voices in the hallway. One of them was David's, polite but slightly tense. The other was male, deep, arrogant in a way that... The blood in Sarah Johnson's veins turned cold instantly. She recognized that voice. "Sarah!" The shout echoed through the mansion. "Sarah, I know you're in there. Get out of that house now." Lily dropped her pencil, her eyes wide with fear. Sarah felt panic rise in her throat, stealing her breath. It couldn't be, not after months. How had he found her? "Lily, go to your room," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm even as her hands trembled. "Now." "Mommy, who is it?" "Go!" Sarah practically shouted, and Lily ran off, tears already streaming down her face. Sarah forced herself to walk to the entrance hall. Mark was at the door, physically blocking the entrance to a man she recognized immediately. Daniel Thompson was 36 years old and had a superficial kind of beauty that deceived, carefully styled blonde hair, light blue eyes, a toothpaste commercial smile. But Sarah knew the cruelty that lurked beneath that attractive facade. He wore an expensive polo shirt and jeans, the relaxed posture of someone used to getting what he wanted. "Sir, for the last time, I'm asking you to leave the property or I will have to call the police, Mark said, his voice firm but controlled. Police? Daniel laughed. Great, call them. I want to see you explain why you're keeping my family hostage in this ridiculous mansion. Your family? Mark repeated, his eyes narrowing dangerously. That was when Daniel saw Sarah at the end of the hallway. His face lit up with the smile she knew all too well, the smile that came before the storm. My love, he said, trying to push past Mark. You have no idea how worried I've been. I searched for you for months. I thought something terrible had happened. Don't you dare call me that, Sarah said, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. And don't you dare pretend you were worried. You know exactly why I left. Sarah, I know we had our problems. Daniel changed tactics, his voice sweetening with false concern. But running away like this, taking my daughter, living on the streets like a beggar, that's madness. You need help, love, professional help, and I'm here to take you back home to give you the treatment you need. Sarah's blood boiled. It was always like this, always twisting reality, making her seem like the crazy one, the unstable one, the one who needed fixing. Lily is not your daughter, Sarah said, stepping forward. You never registered her. You never wanted to. You always made it clear she was a burden, a mistake of mine that you tolerated. Technicalities, Daniel dismissed with a wave of his hand. We lived together for 3 years. I took care of her. You ignored her, Sarah exploded. When you weren't abusing me in front of her, you pretended she didn't exist, and now you want to come here after months and pretend to be a concerned father? Look, Daniel turned to Mark, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. She gets like this sometimes. She freaks out, makes up stories, gets paranoid. That's why she needs proper medical supervision. Mark looked at Sarah, then at Daniel, and when he spoke, his voice was icy. I think I've heard enough. Sarah is an adult, capable of making her own decisions. She chose to be here, to work here. You have no legal rights over her or her daughter. So I suggest you leave my property now before I really call the police. Who do you think you are? Daniel stepped forward, his face red with anger. Some shining knight saving the damsel. She's mine, you understand? Mine. I spent 3 years investing in this woman, putting up with her neuroses, her crises, and now some rich guy thinks he can just... I was never yours, Sarah interrupted, her voice trembling, but determined. I was your prisoner, your victim, but I was never your property, and I will never go back to you. Never. Daniel looked at her with an expression Sarah knew well, that look that came before violence. Instinctively, she took a step back. Mark noticed, and something in his posture changed completely. Get out, he said, his voice dangerously low. Now. Or what? Daniel challenged. Are you going to hit me? In front of witnesses? You'll end up sued, buddy, and I'll have Sarah back faster than you can imagine. I'm not going to hit you, Mark said calmly, but I'll do something better. I'll call my sister, who is a lawyer specializing in domestic violence cases. I'll ask her to start a case against you documenting every abuse Sarah suffered, and then I'll use all my resources, and believe me, there are many, to ensure you never come near her or her daughter again. Daniel's confidence wavered for the first time. You have no proof of anything, he tried, but his voice was less certain. I have my testimony, Sarah said, finding strength she didn't know she had. I have medical records from all the times I went to the hospital with falls and accidents. I have old messages I saved, and she took a deep breath. I have the scars you left on my body. That's enough evidence to start. Daniel looked between Sarah and Mark, realizing he was losing. This isn't over, he finally said, the threat clear in his voice. You can't hide forever in this dollhouse, and when you come out, when he gets tired of you and your baggage, I'll be waiting. Get out, Mark repeated, picking up his phone, or I'll call the police right now and accuse you of trespassing and threats. Daniel stepped back, but his eyes remained fixed on Sarah with a silent promise that this was far from over. Then he turned, and left, slamming the gate hard enough to make the sound echo through the quiet neighborhood. As soon as he was out of sight, Sarah's legs gave way. David caught her before she fell, helping her to the living room sofa. "Breathe," he instructed, his voice gentle. "Slowly. Inhale, counting to 4. Hold. Exhale, counting to 4. Sarah tried to follow the instructions, but her body trembled violently. Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. Years of terror, of abuse, of running away, all coming back in a devastating wave. "Lily," she managed to say between sobs, "I need—" She must be terrified. "I'll go get her," David said, but Sarah grabbed his arm. "No, he might come back. I can't be alone." David hesitated, then took out his phone. "I'll call Victoria. She can come stay with you while I check if he really left." Victoria arrived in 15 minutes, entering the house like a whirlwind of professional efficiency. She had a leather folder under her arm and an expression that could freeze lava. "Sarah," she said, sitting next to her on the sofa. All the coldness from before had vanished, replaced by something that felt like solidarity. "I'm going to ask some tough questions now. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but every detail you give me helps build a stronger case against him." Sarah looked at Victoria, then at David, who was standing near the window, clearly ready to intervene if Mark returned. "Did he hit you?" Victoria asked directly. Sarah nodded. "How often?" "At first, every few months," Sarah said, her voice hoarse. "Then it turned into weeks. By the end, it was almost every day. Anything could trigger it. Food made wrong, clothes ironed in a way he didn't like, Lily crying too much." "Did he hit Lily?" David's question came sharp, urgent. "No," Sarah shook her head. "Never. He completely ignored her. But she saw when he hit me. She heard the screams. Several times she tried to get between us, and I had to push her away, lock her in her room so she wouldn't see." Victoria was quickly jotting down notes on a tablet. "Do you have medical records?" "I do. From city, hospital, from the emergency room. Several. I always made up excuses, but the doctors, some of them knew. They could see it in my eyes." "Good. That helps," Victoria continued. "Messages, emails, any communication that documents the abuse?" Sarah hesitated. "I had some, on my old phone, but when I ran away, it broke. I couldn't save anything." "The providers can recover it," Victoria said. "It's a process, but we can try. And witnesses. Anyone who witnessed the abuse or that you told at the time. My old best friend, Emma," Sarah said. "She's a journalist. She tried to convince me to leave several times. But I pushed everyone away. Mark isolated me little by little. First from my family, then from friends, co-workers. In the end, it was just him and Lily." "We're going to need to talk to this Emma," Victoria noted. "Do you have her contact?" "Not anymore, but she works for the New York State. It shouldn't be hard to find." David, who had been quiet throughout the interrogation, finally stepped closer. "Victoria, how long does it take to get a restraining order?" "We can request an emergency protective order today," Victoria replied. "With Sarah's accounts and the explicit threat he made today, a judge could grant it within 24 to 48 hours. But Sarah," she looked directly at her, "you'll need to file a police report. You'll need to tell everything to the police, dig up painful memories. Are you ready for that?" Sarah thought of Lily, still hiding in her room, probably terrified. She thought of all the nights she had slept in fear, all the mornings she had woken up checking her body before seeing what new marks Mark had left. She thought of the months on the street, preferring the cold, and hunger to going back to that hell. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready. He won't scare me again. I won't let him." "Good." Victoria closed the tablet. "Then here's what we're going to do. Today we're going to the women's precinct to file the report. Tomorrow I'll file for the protective order. In the meantime, David, you install additional security cameras around the property. If he comes back, we want everything recorded." "I'm already calling the company," David confirmed, phone already in hand. Sarah stood up, still trembling but determined. "I need to see Lily. Explain what's happening." "Do you want me to go with you?" David offered. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. Together, they went upstairs to the room. They found Lily curled up on the bed, hugging one of her books like it was a teddy bear, her eyes red from crying. "My love." Sarah sat next to her daughter, pulling her into a tight hug. "It's okay. That man is gone." "It was Mark," Lily sobbed against her mother's shoulder. "I recognized the voice. Is he coming back for us? Do we have to go back?" "No," Sarah said firmly, pulling her daughter away, just enough to look into her eyes. "We will never go back, never. David and Victoria will help us make sure he can't hurt us anymore." "Promise?" Lily asked, her voice small. "I promise," Sarah said. And this time, for the first time in a long time, she truly believed her own promise. David crouched down next to the bed, getting to Lily's level. "Lily," he said softly, "I'm going to make... Sarah Johnson would do everything in her power to keep you and your mommy safe. They are protected here. No one will hurt them as long as I can. Prevent it. Can you trust me?" Lily looked at Mark with her tear-filled green eyes and then extended her pinky finger. "Pinky swear?" she asked. Mark smiled, intertwining his pinky with hers. "Pinky swear." And in that moment, with the filtered afternoon light streaming through the window and a frightened child between them, something fundamental changed. It was no longer Sarah alone against the world. She was no longer carrying the entire weight of Lily's protection on her shoulders. She had allies, she had help. For the first time in years, she had real hope that maybe, just maybe, they could finally be safe. The Women's Protection Unit was located in a worn grey building in the West End of New York, the kind of place that bore the weight of thousands of painful stories in its stained walls. Sarah entered accompanied by Victoria, who insisted on being present throughout the process. Mark stayed home with Lily at Sarah's request. She didn't want the girl to be alone for even a second while Daniel was still out there. The officer who attended to them was a woman in her 50s with greying hair pulled back into a tight bun, tired yet kind eyes. Her name was Dr. Beatrice Collins, according to the nameplate on her cluttered desk, filled with papers and stacked folders. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the worn plastic chairs in front of her desk. "You can start from the beginning. No rush." And Sarah told everything. She recounted how she met Mark in a cafe in Soho almost 4 years ago. How charming and attentive he was, always with the right words. How they dated for 6 months before she discovered she was pregnant with Lily. How Mark reacted with anger at first, accusing her of trying to trap him, but then softened, saying he would take responsibility. She spoke of the first months of pregnancy when he began to criticize small things, the way she dressed, who she talked to, how long she spent outside the home, how those criticisms turned into shouting, how the shouting turned into pushing, how the pushing turned into punches. Sarah's voice trembled as she described the first time he pushed her against the wall when she was 7 months pregnant. How she fell and was terrified of having hurt the baby. How Mark apologized afterward, crying, swearing it would never happen again. How she believed him. "It's always like that at first," Dr. Beatrice commented gently, without judgment. "The cycle of violence and reconciliation. Did he apologize? Was he kind for a while?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed, wiping tears she couldn't contain. "Sometimes for weeks. Once he went almost 2 months without touching me violently. I thought he was changing, that Lily's birth had transformed him, but then it would start again." Victoria completed, her hand finding Sarah's in a surprisingly supportive gesture. Sarah nodded. She recounted the following years. How Mark forbade her from working, saying a mother should be at home. How he controlled every penny, giving her an insulting allowance that barely covered diapers and food for Lily. How she tried to return to teaching and he sabotaged every attempt, calling the schools and making up stories about her being unstable. He said I was crazy, Sarah whispered, that no one would believe me if I told, that I was a terrible mother, that Lily would be better off without me. And part of me started to believe it. Dr. Beatrice pushed a box of tissues across the table. This is psychological. Abuse, Sarah. Just as damaging as physical, sometimes more so. He was deliberately destroying your self-esteem, isolating you, making you doubt your own sanity. It's a common tactic. Sarah recounted the night she finally escaped. How Mark came home drunk, more violent than ever. How he threw her to the kitchen floor, kicking her ribs until she couldn't breathe properly. How Lily, then 4 years old, ran out of her room and yelled for him to stop. And that scream, the absolute terror in her daughter's voice, was what finally broke something in Sarah. I waited for him to sleep, she said, her voice monotone, telling the story as if she were speaking of someone else. I took only the essentials. Some clothes, documents, the little money I managed to hide from him over the months, and I left. In the middle of the night, with Lily in my arms, I walked miles to an old co-worker's house. And she helped you? Dr. Beatrice asked. For a week, Sarah replied. But Mark found me. I don't know how. He showed up at her door making a scene, saying I had kidnapped our daughter, that he was going to call the police. My friend got scared and asked me to leave. I understood. She had a family. She couldn't get involved. From there, Sarah recounted the months on the streets, sleeping in shelters when there was space, on sidewalks when there wasn't, protecting Lily, always putting her daughter's safety above her own. The days without food, the nights in the cold, the constant fear that Mark might find them, or that social services might take Lily away from her. When she finished, the office was silent. Dr. Beatrice had stopped writing, looking at Sarah with an expression that mixed compassion and restrained anger. "You are incredibly brave," she finally said. "You know that, right? Many women never manage to leave, and you not only left, but survived months in the worst possible conditions to protect your daughter." "I don't feel brave," Sarah admitted. "I feel broken." "You may be hurt," Victoria said. Dr. Beatrice said firmly, "but you're not broken. A broken person can't do what you did. A broken person gives up. You fought. You're still fighting." Dr. Beatrice printed the police report, several pages detailing each incident that Sarah reported. "I need you to read this carefully and sign," she instructed. "This document will be crucial for the restraining order and any future criminal proceedings against him." Sarah read everything, each word bringing back memories she would rather forget, but she signed with a steady hand. It was time to stop running. It was time to face it. "Now," Dr. Beatrice continued, "I will forward this police report immediately to the court. Given the nature of the threats and the history of violence, I believe we can secure an emergency restraining order today. In the meantime, I strongly recommend that you don't go out alone. If you need to go somewhere, and take someone with you, preferably a man, as aggressors like Mark tend to be intimidated more by male presence." "She's staying with me," Victoria said. "I mean, at my brother's house, which has a security system, cameras, and now will have private security as well." Dr. Beatrice nodded approvingly. "Excellent. I will also register his address as off-limits. If he shows up there again, it's an immediate violation of the restraining order and could result in jail time." When they left the police station, the sun was already setting, painting the New York sky with shades of orange and pink. Sarah felt strangely light, as if she had dropped a weight she had been carrying for years. telling the story, formalizing what happened, turning years of silent suffering into a legal document. There was power in that. "Are you okay?" Victoria asked as they walked to the car. "I don't know," Sarah replied honestly, "but I feel different, stronger maybe." "You've always been strong," Victoria said, unlocking the car. "You just were alone. Not anymore." The drive back to the mansion was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Sarah looked out the window, watching the city pass by. People coming, home from work, kids playing in parks, normal life happening while she was rewriting her own story. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah finally said. "Of course." Victoria kept her eyes on the road. "Why did you change? Your opinion about me, I mean. When we first met, you made it clear you saw me as a threat, and now I'm sitting here after spending 3 hours in a police station listening to you recount years of abuse," Victoria completed. "Sarah, I've been a lawyer for almost 15 years. I've worked with domestic violence cases before. I thought I knew how to recognize the signs, but when I met you, all I saw was someone living rent-free in my brother's house. I didn't look beyond the surface." She paused at the red light, turning to look at Sarah. "But when Mark showed up today and I saw your reaction, the absolute terror in your eyes, the way you instinctively recoiled when he raised his voice, I understood everything. And I felt like a complete idiot for judging you without knowing your story." "You were protecting your brother," Sarah said softly. "I don't blame you for that." "Still, I was unfair." Victoria turned her attention back to the road when the light turned green. "And I want you to know that you have my full support now. Not just professionally, but personally. No one deserves to go through what you went through, and I will do everything in my power to ensure Mark pays for what he did." Sarah felt tears burning her eyes again, but this time they were different, not from pain or fear, but from gratitude. When they arrived at the mansion, David was waiting at the door, Lily by his side. The girl ran to Sarah as soon as the car stopped. "Mummy!" she shouted, jumping into Sarah's arms. "You took so long, I was worried." "I'm sorry, my love." Sarah hugged her tightly. "But everything is resolved now. Did David take good care of you?" "He made pizza," Lily announced cheerfully. "And let me add the toppings. There's one for you too." Sarah looked over Lily's head at David, who shrugged with a shy smile. "I thought you'd be hungry when you got back," he explained. "And Lily is an excellent assistant chef." "I am," Lily agreed proudly. That night, sitting at the kitchen table eating homemade pizza, which was surprisingly good, Sarah observed the scene around her. Lily was animatedly chatting with David about the different types of cheese they used. Victoria was checking emails on her phone, but occasionally contributed sarcastic comments that made Lily laugh. The kitchen was warm, filled with the smell of food and the sound of voices. It was, Sarah realized with a shock, the closest thing to family she had had in years. "The restraining order has been approved," Victoria announced, looking at her phone screen. "It just came through. Mark is officially prohibited from coming within 300 meters of you or Lily, from making direct or indirect contact, and from entering your residence or workplace. Violation results in immediate detention." "Does that mean he can't come here again?" Lily asked, her voice small. "That's exactly what it means," David replied gently. "And if he tries, he goes to jail." "Good," Lily declared with the brutal simplicity of childhood. "I don't like him. He was mean to Mommy." The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah pulled her daughter onto her lap. "I know, my love. But it's over now. We're safe." Later, after putting Lily to bed, Sarah came downstairs and found David alone in the library. He was sitting in one of the armchairs, a book open on his lap, but clearly not reading, his gaze lost in the distance. "Hi," Sarah said. Sarah Johnson said softly from the door. David looked up, closing the book. Hi, I thought you had already gone to bed. I can't, Sarah admitted, entering and sitting in the armchair next to him. Every time I close my eyes, I relive his visit. I wonder if the restraining order will really keep him away, or if it's just a piece of paper he will ignore. I'm not going to let him get close to you, David said with a conviction that made Sarah believe. I hired security, 2 guards on alternating shifts. I updated the entire camera system. And Victoria is preparing a complete criminal case. He will pay for what he did, Sarah. Why are you doing all this? Sarah asked, the question she had been avoiding but needed to ask. I know what you said before about falling in love with the idea of me, but this goes beyond that. You're spending money, time, resources. Why? David was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing the title of the book in his lap. My mom, he finally said, lived in an abusive relationship for 15 years. My biological father hit her, humiliated us, kept us in deliberate poverty even when he had money to spend on drinks and gambling. I was too young to protect her. I was 8, 9 years old. I saw my mom covered in bruises, trying to hide, pretending everything was okay. Sarah felt her heart tighten. David, I didn't know. She finally got out when I was 12, David continued, his voice hoarse with emotion. But it took years, years of suffering that I witnessed without being able to do anything. And I swore to myself that when I grew up, when I had power and resources, I would never again stand by and watch someone suffer abuse. He finally looked at Sarah, and his eyes shone with unshed tears. So yes, I'm doing this for you, but I'm also doing it for my mom, who had no one to help her, for the child I was, who felt powerless, for all the women who go through what you went through and have no way out. Sarah didn't think. She just stood up and pulled David into a hug. He wrapped her in his arms, and for a long moment they stayed like that. 2 survivors of different but painfully similar stories, finding comfort in each other. Thank you, Sarah whispered against his shoulder, for everything, for believing in me, for helping me, for seeing me. David held her a little tighter. I will always see you, Sarah. The real person you are, not what Mark tried to make you believe you were. And in that embrace, in that quiet library with the smell of old books and the soft light from the lamps, something fundamental changed between them. It was no longer just gratitude or obligation. It was genuine connection, based on shared vulnerability and mutual respect. It was, Sarah realized with surprise and a touch of fear, the beginning of something that could turn into true love. June arrived, bringing the first truly cold days of winter in New York. Sarah woke up to find the garden covered in dew that looked like frost under the weak light of dawn. The mansion, with its central heating system, remained comfortable, but she often found herself appreciating the cold outside through the windows. A way to remember that she had the option to stay inside, warm and safe. Something she hadn't had months ago. David had insisted that she take the opportunity at the school in Brooklyn. After much hesitation, Sarah finally agreed to a meeting with the principal. Lincoln High School was in an old but well-kept building, with walls painted in pastel colors and murals made by students decorating the hallways. The principal, Miss Johnson, was a black woman in her 60s, with white hair styled in elegant buns, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She welcomed Sarah into her office, which was cluttered with books and student work. David told me a bit about your situation, she said, gesturing for Sarah to sit. Not the details, of course, just that you've been through some hardships recently, but are a passionate teacher of literature. I was, Sarah corrected automatically. It's been over a year since I taught my last class. You are, Miss Johnson waved off the distinction. The passion for teaching doesn't just disappear because life knocked you down for a while. The question is, are you ready to come back? Sarah looked out the office windows, seeing teenagers in the courtyard during recess. Some laughed in groups, others sat alone with headphones. Some were hiding and smoking behind the gym building, thinking no one saw them. They were complicated young people, full of problems and potential in equal measures. "I don't know if I'm ready," Sarah admitted, "but I think I need to try." Ms. Johnson smiled, a warm expression that lit up her entire face. "That's the right answer. If you had said, 'You were completely ready without doubts,' I would have been suspicious. Teachers who think they know everything stop learning. And teachers who stop learning stop teaching well." They talked for another hour. About the curriculum, about the specific challenges of that school. Many students from low-income families, some involved in crime, most disbelieving that literature had any relevance to their lives. "Your students are going to test you," Ms. Johnson warned. "They'll see a new temporary teacher and they'll try to break you in the first few days. It's natural. They're used to adults who give up on them." "I won't give up," Sarah said, and realized she believed it. She knew all too well what it was like to be disbelieved, discarded as a lost cause. She started the following Monday. David insisted on driving her on the first day, despite Sarah's protests that she could take the bus. "We are still in the highest risk period," he argued as they drove through the busy streets. "Statistically, the first 3 months after a restraining order are when abusers are most likely to violate the order. Just let me take you and pick you up. Until..." "We're sure that Mark got the message." Sarah agreed, especially because David's presence made her feel safer. Lily was excited to join, eager to see the school where her mother would be working. David had arranged a spot for her at a nearby private school, but she wouldn't start until the following week. The first class was with a sophomore class. 28 teenagers, aged 15 and 16, looked at Sarah with expressions ranging from curiosity to total disinterest. She was nervous, her hands trembling slightly as she wrote her name on the board. "Good morning," she said, turning to face the class. "My name is Sarah Johnson, and for the next few months I will be your literature teacher." "Where's Miss Sonia?" a tall, lanky boy in the back asked, more challengingly than curiously. "Miss Sonia had a family emergency," Sarah replied calmly. "I'm here to substitute for her." "Great, another one who won't last," a girl with purple hair murmured, loud enough to be heard. Sarah could have ignored it, could have gone on with the lesson plan she had carefully prepared, but something in that comment, the bitter resignation in the girl's voice, made her stop. "You're right," she said, surprising the entire class. "I probably won't last. I'm temporary. I'm only here until the end of the semester. And you've probably had dozens of temporary teachers who came in, pretended to care, and left without a trace." The classroom fell silent. She had their attention now. "So, I'm going to make a proposal," Sarah continued, leaning against the desk. "For the next few months, we're going to make a deal. I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to change your lives. I won't promise that literature will solve all your problems, but I promise that every class we have will be honest. We will read stories about real people in real situations, feeling real things. And if you think it's all irrelevant nonsense, you can tell me, directly, without fear of retaliation. Like, can we say that Maya Angelou is boring as hell?" the same boy in the back asked, testing the limits. "We can't use profanity in the classroom," Sarah replied with a small smile. "But yes, you can say you find Maya Angelou tedious, as long as you can articulate why. It's boring is not an argument. It's boring because the language is too convoluted and doesn't connect with my reality. That's an argument. And then we can talk about whether there's a way to make that connection." She saw some faces change, frowns turning into cautious interest. "So," Sarah picked up a battered copy of The Room of Waste by Maya Angelou that she had brought from home. Let's start with someone who definitely isn't boring, someone who lived in the slums of New York, scavenged for survival, and still wrote one of the most powerful diaries in American literature, someone the literary establishment tried to ignore because she didn't fit their idea of what a writer should be. Sarah began to read an excerpt, her voice finding the rhythm she knew so well. Maya's words flowed, raw and honest, describing hunger, daily struggle, the injustice of a society that discarded the poor. When she finished the excerpt, she looked up. The room was completely silent. Some students had tears in their eyes. The girl with purple hair was leaning forward, completely absorbed. Did this really happen? She asked. Did this woman exist? She did, Sarah confirmed. Maya Angelou. She died in 1977, but her words are still alive. Because she wrote about universal experiences, hunger, love, struggle, hope, in a way that no amount of privilege or formal education could capture. This isn't in the curriculum, another student observed. Shouldn't we be studying the classics? We will study the classics too, Sarah promised. But we'll start with stories that prove literature isn't just for the educated elite. It's for anyone who has something true to say and the courage to say it. The bell rang, marking the end of the class. The students slowly got up, several passing by Sarah's desk. "Teacher," the girl with purple hair stopped. "Can you lend me this book? I want to read more." "Of course." Sarah handed over her personal copy. "Take good care of it. It's one of my most treasured possessions." The girl held the book as if it were a treasure. "I'll take care of it. I promise." When the room emptied, Sarah allowed herself a moment of pure joy. She'd forgotten what it was like, connecting students with words that mattered, seeing the exact moment when literature stopped being a school obligation and became a gateway to understanding. The following weeks established a routine. David drove Sarah to school every morning, Lily chattering happily in the back seat about her own school days. Sarah's classes improved as she regained confidence. She introduced the students to Clarice Lispector, Conceição Evaristo, and marginal poets writing in the peripheries. She alternated with classics, Maya Angelou, but focusing on stories that addressed social hypocrisy and inequality that the students recognized. At night, she graded assignments in the library of the mansion, often with David working quietly beside her, both sharing the space in a comfortable companionship that developed organically. But not everything was smooth progress. One afternoon in mid-June, Sarah was leaving school when she saw a car parked across the street. A car Mark recognized, the silver Civic. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there, staring directly at her through the windshield. He wasn't technically violating the restraining order. He kept the required distance of 300 feet. But the message was clear. "I know where you are. I'm watching." Sarah felt the panic rise, but she forced herself not to run. She walked calmly to David's car, which was waiting as always. "He's out there," she said as soon as she got in, her voice trembling. "The silver car across the street." David looked, his jaw tightening. "I'm calling Victoria," he said, grabbing his phone, "and taking pictures. If he's stalking you even with the restraining order, that's additional evidence." But when David raised his phone to take a picture, Mark sped off, disappearing into traffic. "Clever bastard," David murmured. "He knows exactly how far he can go without technically violating the order." "He's going to stalk me forever," Sarah said, feeling tears burn her eyes. "I'll never really be free of him." "Yes, you will," David said fiercely. "Victoria is gathering more evidence. Every sighting, every attempt at intimidation is being documented. Eventually he'll slip up, he'll cross the line, and when that happens, he'll go to jail." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in the darkness of her flat, listening to Lily breathe softly in the bed beside her, thinking of Mark sitting in that car, watching. Around 3 in the morning, she gave up trying to sleep. She went down to the kitchen to make tea, finding to her surprise that David was there, sitting at the breakfast table with an open laptop. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, closing the computer. "No," Sarah admitted, putting water to boil. "I keep thinking about him. How did he know I was working at that school? How did he find out?" "He's probably been following you for days," David said, which wasn't comforting but was honest. "Or he hired someone to do it. Men like him, they don't let go easily." "I'm putting you in danger," Sarah said suddenly, turning to face him. "And Lily, if I weren't here, if I just disappeared—" "No." David stood up, walking over to her. "Don't even finish that thought. You're not putting anyone in danger. Mark is the one doing this. He's responsible for his own actions, not you." "But if something happened to you because of me," Sarah's voice broke. "If Lily got hurt because he's trying to get to me—" "Sarah, look at me." David placed his hands gently on her shoulders. "Nothing is going to happen. We have security. We have lawyers. We have documented evidence. We're doing everything right. And even if we weren't, even if there was a risk, I'd still choose to have you here, you and Lily. Always." Sarah looked into his eyes, seeing absolute sincerity reflected there, and before she could think better of it, before fear or reason could intervene, she leaned in and kissed him. It was a tentative, questioning kiss, laden with months of tension and repressed emotion. David stood still for a moment in surprise, then responded, his hands moving from her shoulders to frame her face with a tenderness that made her want to cry. When they pulled apart, both were breathing heavily. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I shouldn't have. You didn't need to. I just—" "Don't apologize," David said, his forehead resting against hers. "Please, never apologize for this. But Sarah, are you sure? After everything you've been through, the trauma you're still processing, I don't want you to feel like you have to do this, that you owe me something." "It's not about owing," Sarah said, surprised to realize it was true. "It's about choosing something for myself, about wanting something, someone, despite the fear. Maybe because of the fear. I don't know if I'm ready for everything that means, but I want to try, if you want to." "If I want to?" David chuckled softly, a rich and genuine sound. "Sarah, I've wanted this since the moment I saw you talking about Machado de Assis to those teenagers, like you were revealing the secrets of the universe. The question was never if I wanted it, it was if you were ready." "I don't think I'll ever be completely ready," Sarah admitted, "but I don't want to let fear decide my life anymore." They kissed. Again, this time deeper, more urgently. David's hands in her hair, hers gripping his shirt, months of tension dissolving into heat and need. But Sarah pulled away when things started to intensify too much. "Slow," she said, breathing heavily. "I need slow." "Slow," David agreed immediately, stepping back to give her space. "At your pace. Always at your pace." They spent the rest of the night drinking tea, sitting side by side at the table, hands intertwined, talking about everything and nothing until the sun began to rise through the kitchen windows. And when Sarah finally returned to her room, with Lily still sleeping soundly, she lay down feeling something she hadn't felt in so long she almost didn't recognize it. Happiness, scary, fragile, but real. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to feel it. The days that followed the kiss were strange and wonderful in equal measures. Sarah and David navigated their new relationship with the caution of two people carrying too much baggage. They didn't hide it from Lily. The girl was too observant not to notice, but they also didn't make grand declarations. Small, subtle changes marked the transition, hands lingering for a second longer while passing the salt at dinner, glances that lasted a few heartbeats longer than necessary, David kissing. Marina gently kissed her forehead as she said goodbye before leaving for work. Lily seemed to approve. One morning, while they were having breakfast, she looked between the two adults with that brutal honesty of childhood and declared, "Are you two going to date now?" Marina almost choked on her coffee. David had a coughing fit. "Lily, my love," Marina began, not quite sure how to respond. "Because I think you should," Lily continued, spreading jelly on her baguette with intense concentration. "David is nice. He doesn't yell. He reads stories, and he makes you smile for real. Not that fake smile you had when you were sad, but pretended you weren't." Marina felt tears burning in her eyes. How many times had she thought she was hiding her pain from Lily? How many times had she believed she was protecting her daughter by masking her suffering? All the while, those small, perceptive green eyes saw everything. "You're very smart for a 5-year-old, David said softly. "I'm going to be 6 in August," Lily corrected with dignity. "And Miss Johnson said I'm mature for my age. I know what that means. It means I've seen things kids shouldn't see, but I have. So you don't need to pretend with me." Marina reached out, pulling her daughter into a tight hug. "You're right, my love. We're not going to pretend. Yes, David and I are getting to know each other better, seeing if we want to date. But that doesn't change anything between you and me, okay? You always come first, always." "I know, Mommy," Lily said against her shoulder. "But it's okay if he comes second. You deserve to be happy too." David had to leave the kitchen, mumbling something about checking emails. But Marina saw the glimmer of tears in his eyes before he turned his back. July brought intense cold and a constant grey sky over New York. At school, Marina continued to win over her students one class at a time. The girl with purple hair, whose name was Jessica, had become a sort of unofficial spokesperson for the class, defending Marina when other teachers criticized her unconventional methods. "Ms. Marina really makes us think," Jessica argued once in the teacher's lounge when Marina arrived for her break and overheard the conversation. "Not just memorizing and spitting it back on the test. She asks for our opinions about the books. She treats us like what we think matters." "That's very nice, Jessica," a middle-aged math teacher replied condescendingly. "But you need structure, not constant validation of uninformed opinions." "My opinions aren't uninformed," Jessica shot back, and Marina had to hide a smile of pride upon hearing the fire in the girl's voice. "I read 4 books this month. 4. Before Ms. Marina, I didn't read anything but Twitter. So, don't tell me her method doesn't work." Marina decided to intervene before Jessica got into trouble. "Jessica," she called from the doorway, "can we talk for a minute?" The girl followed her into the hallway, a defiant expression still plastered on her face. "I wasn't being disrespectful," she immediately began. "I was just defending you." "I know, and I appreciate it," Marina said sincerely. "But I don't want you to get on the bad side of other teachers because of me. They have their methods, I have mine. Both can be valid." "Their methods are boring," Jessica grumbled. "Maybe," Marina agreed with a small smile. "But they are experienced teachers who have been at this school for years. They deserve respect, even when we disagree with them. Do you understand the difference between disagreeing respectfully and being confrontational?" Jessica thought for a moment, then nodded. "I think so. Like, I can think Mr. Thompson is an outdated dinosaur, but I don't need to say that to his face." "Exactly," Marina laughed. "Save those opinions for your writing. Channel that passion into well-reasoned arguments. It's much more effective than heated discussions in the teacher's lounge." "Ms. Marina," Jessica hesitated, suddenly looking younger and more vulnerable. "Are you going to stay, like after the semester ends? Because I know you're temporary, but you're the first teacher who really seems to care if we understand or not." Marina felt her heart tighten. She hadn't thought beyond the end of the semester. She hadn't considered what would happen afterward. "I don't know yet," she admitted honestly. "But Jessica, listen. Even if I don't stay, you will. And every book you've read, every discussion we've had, everything you've learned, that stays with you, no one can take that away. Understand?" Jessica nodded, but Marina saw the disappointment in her eyes as she returned to the classroom. That night, Marina brought up the topic at the dinner table. "Ms. Johnson asked me if I would be interested in a permanent position," she said, absent-mindedly stirring her food. Ms. Sonia decided not to return. Family emergency turned into a permanent move to Miami. "And what did you say?" David asked, although his carefully neutral tone didn't completely hide his intense interest. "I said I needed to think." Marina looked at Lily, who was drawing in a notebook while eating. "It would be a real job. Fixed salary, benefits, a proper contract, real financial independence." "That's wonderful," David said, and it sounded genuine. "It's what you want, right? To go back to teaching for real?" "It is," Marina admitted. "But it also means looking for a flat. A place of my own for me and Lily. I can't live here forever, working as a housekeeper when I'm actually teaching full-time. It wouldn't be fair to you." The silence that followed was heavy. Lily stopped drawing, looking between the two adults with visible concern. "Do we have to leave?" she asked, her voice small. "I like living here. I like the library. I like the garden. I like David." "I know, my love," Sarah said gently, "and it wouldn't be far away. We would probably look for something close by, near your school and mine." "But it wouldn't be here," Lily said, tears beginning to gather in her eyes. "It wouldn't be our home." "Lily," David knelt beside her chair, "this will always be your home, you understand? Even if you and your mommy live somewhere else, you can come visit whenever you want. The library will still be here, the garden too, and so will I. But it won't be the same," Lily sobbed, and Sarah felt her own heart break. Later, after putting Lily to bed, a long process that involved many tears and repeated assurances that change didn't mean loss, Sarah found David in his office, staring blankly at the computer screen without really seeing anything. "I'm sorry," she said from the doorway. "I didn't want Lily to be so upset." "It wasn't your fault." David turned in his chair to face her. "She's right, after all. It won't be the same." Sarah entered, closing the door behind her. "David, you know I can't keep living here. Indefinitely, right? Especially now with this between us. People will talk. They'll assume things." "Let them assume," David said, but without real conviction. "It's not that simple." Sarah sat in the chair across from his desk. "I have to think about Lily, about how this looks, a single mother living in a mansion with a wealthy man she's romantically involved with. Social workers, if they find out, will question. They'll say I'm using my daughter to secure financial safety. That's absurd," David interrupted, his voice harsh. "Anyone who knows you for 5 minutes knows you're not like that." "But they don't know me," Sarah argued. "They see paperwork. They see a history of living on the streets, of an abusive relationship, of instability. And then they see that I've moved into a mansion with a man who isn't my daughter's father. It doesn't look good, David, no matter what the truth is." David ran his hands over his face, tired. "So what are you saying? That you need to leave to protect appearances?" "I'm saying I need to be able to stand on my own," Sarah said softly, "not out of pride, but because if I can't, if I keep depending on you for everything, I'm going to start resenting it. And then I'm going to start resenting you. And eventually, all of this is going to crumble in a much uglier way than if I just set healthy boundaries now." The logic was irrefutable, and David knew it. She could see it on his face, the struggle between wanting to protect her, keep her safe and close, and understanding that she needed this. "How long?" he finally asked. "Until you find a place and move?" I don't know, a few weeks, a month maybe, Sarah estimated. I need to save first and last month's rent plus a deposit. Even with the school salary, it's going to take some time. I can lend you. No, Sarah interrupted firmly. Thank you, but no. I need to do this on my own. At least this. David nodded slowly, respecting the boundary even though it clearly hurt him. But, Sarah continued, standing up and walking to stand in front of him, that doesn't mean I'm ending whatever this is between us. It just means we need to find a different balance, something that doesn't make me feel like I'm trading one dependency for another. David pulled her closer, his hands resting on her waist. I understand, he said, and you're right. About everything. It's going to be strange. This house finally felt alive again with you here. It's going to feel empty when you leave. We're not going far, Sarah promised, her hands finding his face. And Lily was right. This can still be our home too, just not our only home. They kissed, long and slow, a kiss that tasted of goodbye and promise at the same time. In the following weeks, Sarah began looking for flats. Nothing. Too big. 2 bedrooms, preferably near the school, in safe but affordable neighborhoods. David respected her need to do this alone, but Victoria, who had become an unexpected ally, offered practical help. Let me at least review the lease agreements, she insisted over coffee they had together. Some landlords put in abusive clauses that take advantage of tenants who don't know their rights. Sarah gratefully accepted the help, and it was Victoria who found the perfect flat, a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of an old but well-maintained building in Brooklyn, a 15-minute walk from the school. It had original hardwood floors, large windows, overlooking a tree-lined park, and the rent was within what Sarah could afford. It's perfect, Sarah whispered, walking through the empty space, already imagining where to place the few pieces of furniture they would need to buy. It's small, Victoria observed, compared to David's mansion. It's mine, Sarah replied simply. It's going to be ours, something we build, not something that was given. By the end of July, 3 days before Sarah was set to sign the lease, Mark showed up again. This time it wasn't from a safe distance. He was right at the school gate, waiting for Sarah to come out. She spotted him immediately, her stomach twisting with fear, but instead of backing down, instead of running, something in her hardened. She was tired of having fear, tired of allowing this man to control her life, even from a distance. "Get out of my way, Mark," she said, her voice firm and loud enough for the school security to hear. "I just want to talk," he said, but there was something dangerous in his eyes. 5 minutes. That's all I ask." "You're violating a restraining order." Sarah kept her distance. "There are cameras recording you right now. If you don't leave, I will call the police." "That damn lawyer of yours might have gotten a piece of paper," Mark spat, the mask of civility finally slipping. "But paper doesn't change facts. You are mine. Lily is mine. And sooner or later, you'll come back to where you belong." "We are not yours," Sarah said, pulling out her phone. "We never were. And if you don't leave now, I swear I will have you arrested." "You don't have the guts," Mark sneered as Sarah dialed 911, keeping her eyes fixed on him. "Hello? I need to report a violation of a restraining order. A man is threatening me at Lincoln High School in Brooklyn." Mark realized she wasn't bluffing. With one last look of pure hatred, he turned and ran to his car. But this time Sarah had made the call for real. And this time there were witnesses, school security, teachers, even some students who had seen everything. And this time, when the police arrived 15 minutes later, Sarah had more than enough evidence to ensure that Mark would finally face real consequences. Mark's arrest happened 3 days later on a grey August morning. Victoria called Sarah with the news, her voice filled with professional satisfaction. "The arrest warrant was executed an hour ago," she said. "Violation of a restraining order, threats, stalking. With all the evidence we've compiled, Photos, security camera footage, witness statements, previous medical records. The judge had no choice. He will be detained at least until the trial. Sarah was in the kitchen of her new flat, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. She and Lily had moved in the week before, and although the space was small compared to David's mansion, there was something deeply satisfying about being there. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by her. Every object had its place because she decided so. "How long?" Sarah asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Hard to say for sure," Victoria replied, "but with his history and the severity of the violations, I'm estimating at least 6 months before the trial. And if we can prove everything we know about the previous abuses, he could get 2 to 5 years. Sarah felt something release in her chest, a tension she had carried for so long that she had forgotten what it was like to breathe. Without it, "Thank you," she said, her voice choked, "for everything. Seriously, without you, he would still be out there stalking me." "You fought for yourself," Victoria corrected. "I just provided the legal tools. The courage was all yours." After hanging up, Sarah allowed herself to cry, not tears of sadness or fear, but of pure relief. Lily was at school, her first week in first grade, proudly carrying her new backpack and pencil case. David was at work. She was alone in her own space, and for the first time in years, genuinely safe. The flat was modest. The combined living room and kitchen had a small table that Sarah found at a thrift store, 2 chairs that David insisted on gifting her. "You need somewhere to sit, Sarah. This isn't charity, it's common sense." And an old but comfortable sofa bed donated by Victoria. Lily's room had a twin bed with star-patterned sheets, the same ones she used in the mansion. Another gift from David that Sarah accepted because Lily cried at the thought of leaving them behind. Sarah's own room was Spartan, a mattress on the floor still, a simple dresser, cheap but functional. Curtains. She would buy a bed eventually when she saved enough money. For now, it was enough. The small balcony, actually just a narrow ledge, overlooked a little park. Sarah could see mothers with strollers, elderly people playing chess at concrete tables, kids running between trees. A normal, everyday life, precious in its simplicity. She spent the rest of the morning unpacking books. There were few. Most had been lost when she fled from Mark, and the ones she had now were borrowed from the library or bought at used bookstores with her salary. But they were hers, chosen by her, read by her, loved by her. The phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. Sarah hesitated, old fears almost making her ignore the call. But Mark was in jail. She was safe. "Hello? Sarah? Sarah Johnson?" A female voice, vaguely familiar. "Yes, who is this?" "It's Emma. Emma Ferreira from college." Sarah almost dropped the phone. Emma, her best friend from years ago, before Mark, before everything fell apart. "Emma," Sarah whispered, How did you get my number?" "Victoria Mendez called me," Emma explained. "The lawyer? She said you needed a witness for a case and asked me to reach out." "Sarah, my God, when she told me what you went through, I felt so bad. I tried to find you, you know? When you disappeared 2 years ago, I tried calling, went to your house, but Mark said you didn't want to talk to me." "I know," Sarah said, tears burning her eyes again. "He isolated me from everyone, and I let it happen. I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," Emma said firmly. "You were in an abusive relationship. That's not your fault. It's about intelligence. It's about systematic manipulation. But Sarah, are you okay now? Victoria said you're living alone, working as a teacher." "I am," Sarah confirmed. "I just moved into a flat in Brooklyn. Small, but it's mine. And I'm teaching at Lincoln High School." "That's amazing." The genuine joy in Emma's voice warmed something in Sarah's chest. "You've always been an incredible teacher. I remember how excited you got talking about literature. How you wanted to change lives through books. Do you remember that? Sarah asked, surprised. Of course I remember, Emma said. Sarah, you were one of the brightest people I've ever met. Watching you disappear, knowing something was wrong but not being able to help. It was awful. They talked for almost an hour. Emma shared about her journalism career. She was working at the New York Times now, covering local politics. She mentioned a difficult divorce, how she now understood better the complexity of destructive relationships. She offered help in any way she could, testimony at Rodrigo's trial, professional connections, simply a friend to talk to. Can we meet? Emma asked. Like, grab coffee? No pressure, just, I really missed you, Sarah. I missed you too, Sarah admitted. Yes, let's set up a coffee. It would be nice. After hanging up, Sarah sat on the small balcony, processing. Rodrigo in jail, own flat, job she loved, friend back in her life, and David. They'd seen each other every day since the move, of course. He picked up Sarah and Lily sometimes. They had dinner together other times. He helped with little things around the flat that Sarah allowed, fixing a leaky faucet, installing a curtain she couldn't reach. But there was a new distance, a hesitation on both sides as they navigated what it meant to be together, but not share constant space. That night, when David arrived for dinner, a new Friday tradition they established, Sarah greeted him with a tighter, longer hug than usual. Rodrigo was arrested, she said against his chest. Victoria called this morning. She felt David relax, a tension he had been carrying finally dissolving. Thank God, he murmured, kissing the top of her head. Finally. Are you okay? I'm better than okay. Sarah pulled back to look at him. I'm free, for real, for the first time in years. Lily came running from her room, jumping on David with excitement. Uncle David, look what I drew at school today. She showed a paper with what looked like a colourful house, 3 stick figures in front. That's me, Mommy, and you. Sarah and David exchanged a look over the top of the girl's head. David looked moved, speechless. It's beautiful, Lily, Sarah said softly. But, sweetheart, David doesn't live with us. Remember? I know, Lily said, as if it were obvious. But he's family anyway. Miss Johnson said family isn't just who lives together, it's who truly loves you. Sarah felt her heart tighten. David knelt down to be at Lily's level. Your teacher is very wise, he said, his voice thick. And you are too. Can I keep this drawing? You can. Lily proudly handed over the paper. I'll make another one for you to take home too. During dinner, simple pasta that Sarah prepared, nothing elaborate but made with care. They talked about each other's days. Lily chatted about her new best friend at school, a girl named Emma, who also loved to draw. David shared about a business expansion project, speaking in simplified terms that even Lily could follow. And you? David asked Sarah. How were your classes today? Intense, Sarah smiled. We're starting The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Half the class found it too depressing, the other half was completely absorbed. Jessica wrote a 3-page analysis on how the drought is a metaphor for structural poverty. 3 pages, David, without me asking. She adores you, David observed. By the way, every time I pass by the school, I see your students animatedly discussing the books. You're making a real difference. I'm trying, Sarah said. But it's not about me. It's about giving them tools to think for themselves, to see that literature isn't just beautiful words on old pages. It's about understanding the world, understanding themselves. After Lily went to bed, Sarah and David stayed in the small living room, sitting on the sofa bed, drinking tea. This place suits you. Yee, David said, looking around. Simple, honest, full of books. It's small, Sarah said, but without shame. But it's ours. Lily has her own room for the first time since she was born. I have space to breathe without feeling like I owe something to anyone." "You never owed me anything," David said softly. "I know," Sarah took his hand. "At least I know that now. It took me a while to really understand that. That help doesn't have to come with debt. That kindness can be genuine." "Sarah," David turned to face her completely. "These last few months, since you moved, it's been strange. The house feels empty without you guys. I catch myself making coffee for 3 people in the morning before remembering that I'm alone. I walk around the yard and see the spots where Lily used to play, and I feel I miss it. I miss it a lot." "I know," Sarah whispered. "I miss it too. But I needed this. I needed to prove to myself that I can do this on my own." "And you have," David said. "You're working, paying rent, raising Lily, rebuilding friendships. You, Sarah Johnson, was one of the strongest people I know. So now that you've tried, can I ask you a question?" Sarah felt her heart race. "Sure." David took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Do you think that eventually, when you're ready, we could try again? Not you, living with me as a dependent, but us, together, as equal partners, building something. I don't know exactly what it would look like. Maybe you and Lily stay here. Maybe I spend more time here too. Maybe in the future we find a place that's ours, really ours, chosen together. But however it is, you and I officially, intentionally together. Because, Sarah," his voice broke slightly, "I love you. Not the idea of you, not the woman I saw teaching months ago, but you. The real, complicated, strong, scared, brave person sitting here right now." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. For the first time in her adult life, someone was declaring love without demands, without conditions, without attempts at control, disguised as care. "I love you too," she said, her voice trembling. "And it terrifies me completely, because the last time I loved someone, it almost destroyed me, almost destroyed Lily. And I'm so afraid of making the same mistakes, of not recognizing warning signs until it's too late." "Then we set rules," David suggested. "Clear boundaries. If I do something that makes you feel controlled, you tell me, immediately, without fear of retaliation, because there won't be any. If you need space, you ask for it, and I'll give it. No questions asked, no making you feel guilty. We learn together, slowly, respecting each other's process." "Would you do that?" Sarah asked. "Would you have patience with all my trauma, all my insecurities?" "Sarah." David wiped a tear from her face with his thumb. "Love isn't just for the easy days. It's for the days when you wake up with nightmares about Mark. It's for the moments when you need to lock yourself in the bathroom to have a panic attack away from Lily. It's for when you doubt everything, including me, because at the end of the day, I still choose you. I will always choose you." Sarah kissed him then, desperate and hopeful at the same time, and when they pulled apart, she whispered against his lips, "Yes, let's try." Slowly, with clear boundaries, but yes. The months that followed were not perfect. There were arguments about money, about boundaries, about the pace of the relationship. There were moments when Sarah pulled back, scared by ghosts of the past. There were times when David tried to solve her problems instead of just being present while she worked through them. But they always talked. They always apologized when they were wrong. They always chose, consciously, actively, to work through difficulties instead of running away from them. Emma became a constant presence again, Friday night dinners turning into a tradition. Victoria, surprisingly, also became a close friend, her fierce protection of David expanding to include Sarah and Lily. Mark's trial happened in November. Sarah testified, her voice firm and clear as she recounted years of abuse. Others testified too. Doctors who treated her, neighbors who heard screams, Emma herself who saw the bruises and tried to intervene. In the end, Mark was sentenced to 4 years in jail for domestic violence, threats, and violation of a restraining order. When the sentence was read, Sarah didn't feel victory exactly. She felt closure, late justice, but finally served. December brought the scorching summer of New York. Sarah completed her first year as a full-time teacher at the school. Miss Johnson had offered her a permanent position in September, and she accepted without hesitation. Her students organized a surprise party, Jessica leading the efforts with homemade cake and handwritten cards talking about how Sarah had changed their perspectives on literature, on learning, on their own abilities. On Christmas Eve, Sarah, Lily, and David spent the day at the mansion, which had become a shared space, not David's house where they visited, but genuinely everyone's space. Victoria came for dinner, bringing her teenage daughter, whom Sarah didn't know. Emma showed up too, bringing wine and funny stories from the newspaper. After everyone left and Lily was sound asleep in the room they still kept at the mansion for these occasions, Sarah and David sat in the yard, watching the Christmas lights he had insisted on putting up because Lily asked. "Do you remember," David said, taking Sarah's hand, "that night in the rain? When I made the proposal? How could I forget?" Sarah smiled. "I thought you were crazy or dangerous. Possibly both. And now, Sarah nestled against him. "I think you're the kindest person I've ever met. Possibly foolish for falling in love with a woman with so much baggage, but kind." "It's not foolishness." David kissed her hair. "It was the best decision I ever made. Even with all the problems, Mark, the trauma, my occasional panic attacks." "Especially because of that," David said, "because it showed me who you really are. Not someone broken, but someone who rebuilt herself, brick by brick, day by day. It's the most inspiring thing I've ever witnessed." Sarah turned her face to kiss him, long and soft. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping that night, for making the proposal, for being patient, for loving me when I could barely love myself." "Always," David promised. "I will always stop. I will always wait. I will always love you." And sitting there, under the stars and Christmas lights, with Lily sleeping safely inside the house, Sarah realized something fundamental. She had built a life. Not perfect, not without scars or difficulties, but a life actively chosen. With work she loved, a daughter who thrived, friends who supported her, and a man who loved her for who she truly was. Months later, when spring returned to color New York, Jessica was organizing books in her classroom when she entered, now in her senior year, about to graduate. "Teacher," the girl said, holding an envelope, "I wanted you to be the first to know. I passed the entrance exam. I'm going to study literature at NYU because of you." Marina felt tears of pride. "It wasn't because of me," she said, hugging her student. "It was because of you, your dedication, your talent, your passion." "But you showed me it was possible," Jessica insisted. "You made me believe that girls from the South Side can love literature too, can teach, can make a difference." After Jessica left, Marina was alone in her classroom, looking at the empty desks, the books on the shelves, and the posters of American writers she had put on the walls. Her phone rang, message from David. "Dinner tonight? Lily is asking for lasagna and my company is requested." Marina smiled, typing a reply. "Of course, but I'm cooking this time. Your lasagna is getting better, but it's still no match for mine." The response came immediately. "Challenge accepted. Winner chooses the movie for tonight." Marina put her phone away, grabbed her bag, and left the school. The afternoon sun bathed the streets of Brooklyn in golden light. She walked to her flat, greeting neighbors along the way, stopping to buy ingredients for the lasagna at the small grocery store on the corner, And as she walked, Marina thought about how life could change, how a rainy night, an unexpected proposal, and the courage to accept help could transform everything, not in a magical or instantaneous way, but through hard work, conscious choices, and the willingness to believe, despite all fear, despite all contrary evidence, that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be happy. And more importantly, that happiness was not something given or taken by others, but something built, day by day, choice by choice, with her own hands. Sarah Johnson had started on a sidewalk on Fifth Avenue, without hope and without direction. Now she had a flat, a job, love, friends, a future. Not because she was saved, but because she saved herself. And maybe in the end, that was the only story of salvation that really mattered.